Hello, my name is Angela. I'm 31 years old and have been working for 5 years. Recently, I accepted a marriage proposal from my boyfriend of 3 years, and now we're in the midst of planning our wedding and honeymoon. We met at work, where he was a senior colleague who always offered help whenever I faced challenging tasks. Unlike my quieter college days, when my first relationship ended due to my shy nature, my life changed significantly after entering the workforce. My fiancé, who is 4 years older than me, appeared reliable and sincere from the start. Our romance began with a memorable date at an aquarium, where we bought a dolphin figurine that I still treasure. His intentions for a future together were clear from the beginning, filling me with happiness. When he proposed at the same aquarium, I was overjoyed, so much so that I could hardly sleep from excitement. But the magic started to fade a little after we visited his parents following our engagement. While his father was warm and welcoming, his mother wasn't as kind. During our first meeting, she openly criticized me, which left me feeling uneasy and uncertain about what my married life might look like. This encounter heightened my concerns and exposed deeper issues I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I tried to convince myself that pre-wedding jitters were normal, even as doubts crept in. Despite those doubts, I carried on with the wedding preparations, outwardly pretending everything was fine. In one of our discussions about life after marriage, the topic of quitting my job came up. Both my fiancé and his mother expected me to leave my career behind once we were married. While I'd once considered the idea, at that moment, I realized it didn't sit well with me. My job had become a sanctuary of stability, and with the uncertainties looming over my future, I wasn't ready to give it up. Despite my mother-in-law's repeated insistence that I quit, I decided to stay at my job, which happened to be the same company where my fiancé worked. As we worked through our wedding plans, we hit some disagreements, especially about when to register our marriage. My fiancé pushed for an earlier date, and after some hesitation, I agreed to his timeline. The registration process itself felt routine, but once it was official, I experienced a wave of joy knowing we were now truly married. We initially planned for a small, intimate wedding. However, once my husband mentioned this to his mother, everything changed. The very next day, she called us, her voice brimming with disapproval. "A small wedding? Gregory deserves something grand, and I'll make sure it is. And keep your guest list short, just your parents and close friends. I assume your friends are dull. They'll just ruin the atmosphere." Her words were harsh and domineering, and before we knew it, she had taken complete control of the wedding planning. From the venue to the guest list, she dictated every detail. It was overwhelming how easily she assumed control. Reluctantly, I agreed to her demands, trimming my guest list to only close family and friends, as she insisted. But that wasn't the end of her interference. She had opinions about everything: the program, the entertainment, the decor, even the menu. Her extravagant choices pushed the budget far beyond what we had initially agreed upon. Gregory's family had promised to cover half of the wedding costs, but just as quickly as they offered, they withdrew their support, leaving me responsible for covering the excess caused by her over-the-top ideas. I tried to keep things under control by making budget-friendly decisions in secret, but she criticized those too, accusing me of making the wedding look cheap because I didn't follow her vision. After the wedding, I hoped for a break from her dominating influence, but my husband had other plans. Without consulting me, he decided that we would live with his mother. The apartment we had leased was suddenly canceled, and all my belongings were redirected to his family's house. I was blindsided. Every decision about our future together had been made without my input. Planning the wedding had been challenging enough, but this new development left me feeling completely sidelined in my own marriage. When I brought up my concerns to Gregory, especially about the wedding costs spiraling beyond our budget, he brushed me off. The anxiety I had been battling since before the wedding only intensified afterward. We had planned an incredible honeymoon abroad, to a destination I had always dreamed of visiting. 4 months. The thought of this trip kept me going through all the chaos. But as excited as I was, I couldn't ignore Gregory's strange behavior leading up to it. Despite the significance of the trip, he was oddly uncooperative, insisting on handling all the bookings for flights and accommodations himself. At the time, I thought he was being sweet, taking on some responsibility to give me a break. Little did I know, it was a sign of something much more unsettling. Once the wedding frenzy had died down, our honeymoon was finally upon us. Even though I had mixed emotions about our recent experiences and the impending reality of living with my mother-in-law, I resolved to enjoy the trip. But as I stayed up late that night, finishing last-minute packing for our early morning flight, Gregory casually dropped a bombshell that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Angela, I'm going on this trip with my mom," Gregory announced casually as I double-checked our luggage. His words hit me like a brick, leaving me momentarily stunned. "What are you talking about? This is our honeymoon, not just any trip. Why would your mother come with us? We've only paid for 2 tickets, and everything is booked just for us," I protested, my voice shaking with confusion. His next words shattered the little clarity I had left. "I never said I was going with you. Don't be ridiculous. I'm going with my mom. It's a thank you trip for all she's done for me. You stay here and get the house ready, clean every corner." Before I could even respond, he grabbed my passport, the one I had entrusted to him for the trip, and ripped it apart. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the room, matching the disbelief that flooded through me. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. As if on cue, my mother-in-law barged into the room, fully made up, without so much as knocking. "Gregory, are you ready?" she chirped with a smug grin. His face lit up in a way that made me feel sick. "Yeah, we're all set. Finally, we can enjoy this trip without any interruptions," he replied, casting a glance in my direction as they both shared a gleeful laugh. I stood there, utterly dismayed, realizing in that moment I was not just on the brink of marrying into a controlling family, I was trapped in a nightmare. While I had been worrying about how to manage living with my mother-in-law, this was beyond anything I had imagined. "I see what kind of people you two really are," I finally managed to say. Though my words seemed to mean nothing to them, they continued to laugh as they left together. My hopes of a honeymoon, a fresh start, and the loving marriage I had envisioned evaporating in an instant. I had thought Gregory was being thoughtful by handling the honeymoon arrangements, but it turned out he had been planning the entire trip for his mother from the start, booking everything under her name and leaving me to shoulder the costs. The betrayal was staggering. What should have been the most beautiful memories, our intimate wedding, our perfect honeymoon, were now ruined, tainted by the selfishness of my husband and his mother. As the weight of the situation crashed down on me, I realized I couldn't continue in this marriage. Gregory's actions had crossed a line, and I knew in my heart I had to divorce him. Ironically, I had been recording audio since the beginning of our wedding planning, hoping to capture all the special moments leading up to our wedding and honeymoon. At first, it had been a sentimental project, meant to preserve happy memories, but what began as a way to document joy quickly transformed into something else: evidence. Every cutting remark, every hurtful action from my mother-in-law, was captured on those recordings. At first, I doubted their usefulness, thinking I'd never want to relive those moments. But now, they had become the very proof I needed to support my decision to move forward with a divorce. In the days following the disaster, while I was supposed to be settling into our shared home, I was quietly packing to leave. I had barely unpacked in the first place, so it didn't take long to gather my things. As I prepared to walk away from the life I thought I was starting, anger about Gregory and his mother going on our honeymoon without me loomed large in my mind. But I forced myself to focus on what mattered now, my next steps forward. As I cleaned the house one final time, wanting to erase any trace of my brief stay, I stumbled upon something shocking. In the living room, left carelessly out in the open, were documents that revealed Gregory had been embezzling money from his company. He oversaw sales and had been underreporting earnings, pocketing the difference for himself. What was even more disturbing was that his mother was deeply involved. Among the papers, I found a meticulous record she had kept, detailed notes of the real sales figures, the amounts Gregory had stolen, and even a list of luxury items he had bought for her with the stolen money. A diary documenting their entire scheme sat right there, as if they had no concern about being caught. Stunned by the scale of their deceit, I realized I wasn't just walking away from a toxic marriage, I had uncovered something far more dangerous. I briefly considered whether my position at the company could help me resolve things quietly, but I quickly dismissed the idea. Why should I protect someone who had so callously discarded me for a trip with his mother? Armed with evidence of Gregory's embezzlement, I decided to confront the situation directly. Though Gregory and his mother were supposed to be enjoying their honeymoon, my unexpected appearance at work caused quite a stir. My colleagues and superiors were taken aback to see me at the office instead of on a tropical island. "Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" they asked, puzzled. I no longer saw any reason to hide the truth. I explained that Gregory and his mother had gone on the honeymoon without me, leaving me behind after destroying my passport and leaving me with the full cost of the trip. The shock and outrage from my coworkers were immediate and intense. Fortunately, I had a unique ally in the company, my uncle, one of the top executives. I had always kept our relationship a secret to avoid any hint of nepotism. Having secured my position based on my own merits, my uncle had agreed to keep our family connection confidential. Since childhood, he had been a supportive figure in my life, often indulging me with treats during our trips together, much to my parents' chagrin. With the evidence of Gregory's embezzlement in hand and my uncle's support, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I approached his office, presenting the situation to his secretary, who let me in. My uncle, initially greeting me with a warm smile, quickly sensed that something was wrong as his expression shifted to concern. "Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Seeing his familiar and caring face, I was overwhelmed and burst into tears. Through my sobs, I recounted everything: the betrayal by Gregory and his mother, their lavish trip on what was meant to be our honeymoon, and the shocking discovery of Gregory's embezzlement. It was a painful revelation, but it was also the first step towards reclaiming my independence and addressing the betrayal that had rocked my world. My uncle's concern swiftly transformed into anger as he listened to my account, a side of him I had never witnessed before. With his brow furrowed in deep concentration, he promised to convene a board meeting to address Gregory's embezzlement immediately. After I handed over the evidence, he asked about my plans for the rest of the day. I mentioned I was heading home, but he insisted, "Let's grab some good food first. I'll drop you off at home afterward." Despite the crushing betrayal, I felt a sense of comfort and relief knowing I had such a supportive and caring presence in my life. 2 weeks later, when Gregory and his mother returned from their trip, I received an irate call from him. He was furious that I hadn't picked them up from the airport or cleaned the house as he had demanded. He ranted about my absence, but I cut him off. "You two are loud and annoying. I have no reason to pick up someone I'm about to divorce, nor will I follow your absurd demands to clean," I said, my voice sharp and resolute. Gregory was momentarily taken aback, speechless, but quickly resumed his tirade. "Do you think you can talk to me like that? I did you a favor by marrying you. If I divorce you, you'll never remarry. My mom's furious too. If you come back now and make us some traditional meals, I might consider forgiving you. We're tired of foreign food," he demanded, his tone harsher than ever before. His words were a brutal revelation of his true nature, and it became painfully clear to me how little I had truly known him. After everything, his deceit with the passport, His decision to go on a trip with his mother, his character was laid bare. I've already consulted a lawyer about our divorce. Any further matters should be discussed with them, I replied, maintaining my composure. A lawyer? What are you talking about? I'm not getting a divorce, he retorted, his voice a mix of confusion and panic. In the background, I could hear his mother demanding the phone and hurling insults my way. Do what you please. By the way, I've informed the company about your embezzlement. They'll be calling you in soon. Maybe you should get a lawyer too, I replied, sensing his growing panic. It was no longer my problem. He continued to call, but I blocked his number, cutting off all communication. My uncle, aware of the supposed honeymoon dates, had already acted. The company summoned Gregory based on the evidence I provided. They verified the discrepancies in front of the executives. Gregory's attempts to fabricate a story fell flat as he tried to blame me, claiming I was the real embezzler and that he had tried to stop me. At that point, my uncle's patience snapped. My niece would never do such a thing. We've confirmed that you and your mother are responsible for the embezzlement. You're lucky we haven't involved the police yet, he shouted, his voice brimming with fury. Realizing that I was connected to senior management, Gregory appeared utterly defeated, as if he had lost everything. Later that day, I went to the company to return the wedding gifts I had received from my colleagues. Given that our marriage had ended so abruptly, however, my colleagues refused to take them back, insisting that they had given them as a gesture of their support and good wishes, which only deepened my appreciation for their kindness during this tumultuous time. As I was surrounded by the supportive warmth of my colleagues, Gregory approached me in desperation. Why didn't you tell me you were related to the top brass? I'm sorry. Can we start over? Can you ask your uncle to keep me in the company and make the embezzlement go away? He pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. Disgusted by his audacity, I shot back. Do you even understand the gravity of what you're saying? Are you out of your mind? Divorce is the only option now. Reflect on your actions and face the consequences. After firmly pushing him away, it was clear he had nowhere else to turn. His desperate clinginess was a pitiful sight, but it was evident that his options had run out. As my colleagues witnessed Gregory's desperate pleas, they called security, who promptly escorted him out. He was terminated immediately, and the company began pursuing damages for the embezzlement. Amid the chaos, my mother-in-law attempted to contact my family repeatedly. However, once she spoke with my level-headed father-in-law, those calls ceased. I had always wondered why he allowed our honeymoon plans to proceed, but I later understood his perspective. He apologized, explaining that he had been misled into believing my mother-in-law was going on a domestic trip with friends. He had been looking forward to some peace away from her constant nagging about shopping and dining out. Following the debacle, my father-in-law supported my decision to return to my parents' home and even helped me pack. Emotions were running high, and we left with minimal discussion, knowing my father-in-law's genuine, kind, and rational nature. I realized he would have intervened had he known the true intentions behind the trip. He was the only member of that household whom I felt I could trust. Despite being the victim, the fact that my honeymoon had been hijacked by my mother-in-law was deeply embarrassing. I contemplated resigning from my job, and my parents suggested taking some time off. However, my uncle, understanding that work might serve as a distraction, arranged for me to be transferred to a branch office. This move provided me with the space I needed to heal and refocus. The divorce proceedings progressed smoothly, thanks to an excellent lawyer. During this process, I discovered more about the financial dynamics of my in-laws' family. They were an average working-class family with minimal savings. Further strained by my mother-in-law's extravagant spending habits, my father-in-law, recognizing the gravity of the situation, ended up selling the family home to cover the substantial alimony, driven by the short duration of our marriage. When I returned to the family home with my luggage on what was supposed to be our honeymoon departure day, Neighborhood gossip began to spread. The story of our failed marriage and subsequent scandal quickly circulated, exaggerated by local rumors. The situation became unbearable, and it was clear I needed to leave the area. My mother-in-law, who had initially approved of our marriage for its status benefits, found it increasingly difficult to face the community, overwhelmed by embarrassment and the financial strain. My father-in-law felt compelled to take responsibility for the damages caused by my husband's actions. Despite my deep disdain for my husband and mother-in-law, I can't help but feel profound sympathy for my father-in-law. After the upheaval, my husband being fired, ordered to pay damages, and my decision not to return, my husband spiraled into a mental breakdown. Now unable to work, he spends his days listlessly in a modest apartment he moved into. Witnessing her son in such a state has caused my mother-in-law to become withdrawn and reclusive. In a candid conversation, my father-in-law expressed his exhaustion with my mother-in-law's behavior and revealed that he was considering a divorce. He no longer wanted to spend his remaining years in discontent and asked if I could connect him with the lawyer I had used. I immediately reached out to my uncle, who facilitated contact with the lawyer. While it might take some time, I am hopeful that my father-in-law will be able to start anew and find a path to a happier life. Thanks to the intervention of the company's CEO and my uncle, I was transferred to a branch office. This change has been a blessing, as I'm now surrounded by colleagues and superiors who are incredibly supportive. I am eternally grateful for my uncle's assistance throughout these trying times. My only regret is missing out on the country we had planned to visit for our honeymoon. Once everything settles down, I hope to make that trip abroad, fulfilling the dream that was originally meant to be shared but now will serve as a celebration of new beginnings and personal freedom.